Hare Krishna. Let us start with our recitation. Om Ajnantimirandasya Jnananjana Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine. Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Sunyavadi Paschatadesha Tarine वाञ्छाकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्येव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैता गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौरभक्तवृंद। हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम Rama Rama Hare. And thank you each and every one of you for joining today's session. So we are reading the 12th chapter, the birth of the Parikshith Maharaj. Let me share my screen. One dot 12.1. Translation purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Hare Krishna Prabhu.
Hare Krishna. Translation. The sage Saunaka said, the womb of Uttara, mother of Maharaj Parikshit, was spoiled by the dreadful and invincible Brahmastra weapon released by Ashwatthama. But Maharaja Parikshit was saved by the Supreme Lord. Purport. The sages assembled in the forest of Naimisaranya inquired from Sutta Goswami about the birth of Maharaja Parikshit. But in the course of the narration, other topics like the release of the Brahmastra by the son of Drona, his punishment by Arjuna, Queen Kunti Devi's prayers, and the Pandavas' visit to the place where Bhishmadeva was lying, his prayers, and thereafter the Lord's departure for Dwaraka were discussed. His arrival at Dwaraka and residing with the 16,000 queens were narrated. The sages were absorbed in hearing such descriptions, but now they wanted to turn to the original topic, and thus inquiry was made by Shaunaka Rishi. So the subject of the release of the Brahmastra weapon by Ashwatthama is renewed. Hare Krishna.
12.2. Translation purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Hare Krishna Vandana Mataji. Hare Krishna, you are not audible. Hare Krishna Mataji, are you speaking? Hare Krishna Rita Mataji, you can continue.
Okay. Hare Krishna Prabhuji. Translation. How was the great Emperor Parikshit, who was a highly intelligent and great devotee, born in that womb? How did his death take place? And what did he achieve after his death? Purport. The king of Hastinapura, now Delhi, used to be the emperor of the world, at least till the time of the son of Emperor Parikshit. Maharaja Parikshit was saved by the Lord in the womb of his mother. So he could certainly be saved from an untimely death due to the ill will of the son of a Brahmana. Because the age of Kali began to act just after the assumption of power by Maharaja Parikshit, the first sign of misgivings was exhibited in the cursing of such a greatly intelligent and devoted king as Maharaja Parikshit. The king is the protector of the helpless citizens, and their welfare, peace, and prosperity depend on him. Unfortunately, by the instigation of the fallen age of Kali, an unfortunate Brahmana's son was employed to condemn the innocent Maharaja Parikshit, and so the king had to prepare himself for death within 7 days. Maharaja Parikshit is especially famous as one who is protected by Vishnu, and when he is unduly cursed by a Brahmana's son, he could have invoked the mercy of the Lord to save him. But he did not want to, because he was a pure devotee. A pure devotee never asks the Lord for any undue favor. Maharaja Parikshit knew that the curse of the Brahmana's son upon him was unjustified, as everyone else knew. But he did not want to counteract it because he knew also that the age of Kali had begun and that the first symptom of the age, namely degradation of the highly talented Brahmana community, had also begun. He did not want to interfere with the current of the time, but he prepared himself to meet death very cheerfully and very properly. Being fortunate, he got at least 7 days to prepare himself to meet death, and so he properly utilized the time in the association of Sukadeva Goswami, the great saint and devotee of the Lord. Hare Krishna.
112.3. Translation purport by Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Hare Krishna, Manila Mataji.
Hare Krishna. Translation. We all respectfully want to hear about him, Maharaj Parikshit, to whom Sukadeva Goswami imparted transcendental knowledge. Please speak on this matter. Purport. Sukadeva Goswami imparted transcendental knowledge to Maharaj Parikshit during the remaining 7 days of his life, and Maharaj Parikshit heard him properly, just like an ardent student. The effect of a bona fide hearing and chanting of Srimad Bhagavatam was equally shared by both the hearer and chanter. Both of them were benefited. Out of the 9 different transcendental means of devotional service to the Lord prescribed in the Bhagavatam, either all of them or some of them or even one of them are equally beneficial if properly discharged. Maharaj Parikshit and Sukadeva Goswami were serious performers of the first 2 important items, namely the process of chanting and the process of hearing, and therefore both of them were successful in their laudable attempt. Transcendental realization is attained by such serious hearing and chanting and not otherwise. There is a type of spiritual master and disciple much advertised in this age of Kali. It is said that the master injects spiritual force into the disciple by an electric current generated by the master, and the disciple begins to feel the shock. He becomes unconscious, and the master weeps for his exhausting his store of so-called spiritual assets. Such bogus advertisement is going on in this age, and the poor common man is becoming the victim of such advertisement. We do not find such folktales in the dealings of Sukadeva Goswami and his great disciple Maharaj Parikshit. The sage recited Srimad Bhagavatam in devotion, and the great king heard him properly. The king did not feel any shock or electrical current from the master, nor did he become unconscious while revealing the knowledge from the master. One should not therefore become a victim of these unauthorized advertisements made by some bogus representative of Vedic knowledge. The sages of Naimirtaranya were very respectful in hearing about Maharaj Parikshit because of his receiving knowledge from Sukadeva Goswami by means of ardent hearing. Ardent hearing from the bona fide spiritual master is the only way to receive transcendental knowledge, and there is no need for medical performances or occult mysticism for miraculous effects. The process is simple, but only the sincere party can achieve the desired result. Hare Krishna.
12.4. Translation purport by Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Hare Krishna, Sri Ganesh Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Translation. Sri Sutta Goswami said, Emperor Yudhishthira administered generously to everyone during his reign. He was exactly like his father. He had no personal ambition and was freed from all sorts of sense gratification because of his continuous service onto the lotus feet of Lord Sri Krishna. Purport. As mentioned in our introduction, there is need for the signs of Krishna in human society for all the suffering humanity of the world, and we simply request the leading personalities of all nations to take care to the signs of Krishna for their own good, for the good of society, and for the good of all people of the world. So it is confirmed herein by the example of Maharaja Yudhishthira, the personality of goodness. In India, the people hanker after Ramaraja because the personality of Godhead was the ideal king, and all other kings or emperors in India control the destiny of the world for the prosperity of every living being who took birth on the earth. Herein the word Praja is significant. The etymological import of the word is that which is born. On the earth, there are many species of life, from the aquatics up to perfect human beings, and all are known as prajas. Lord Brahma, the creator of this particular universe, is known as the Prajapati because he is the grandfather of all who have taken birth. Thus, Praja is used as a broader sense than it is now used. The king represents all living beings, the aquatics, plants, trees, reptiles, birds, animals, and man. Every one of them is part and parcel of the Supreme Lord. And the king, being the representative of the Supreme Lord, is duty bound to give proper protection to every one of them. This is not the case with the presidents and dictators of the demoralized system of administration, where the lower animals are given no protection when the higher animals are given so-called protection. But this is a great science which can be learned only by one who knows the science of Krishna. By knowing the science of Krishna, one can become the most perfect man in the world. And unless one has knowledge in this science, all qualification and doctorate diplomas acquired by academic education are spoiled and useless. Maharaja Yudhishthira knew the science of Krishna very well. For it is stated here that by continuous cultivation of this science or by continuous devotional service to the Lord Krishna, he acquired the qualification of administering the state. The father is sometimes seemed cruel to the son, but that does not mean that father has lost the qualification to be a father. The father is always a father because he always has the good of the son at heart. The father wants every one of his sons to become a better man than himself. Therefore, a king like Maharaja Yudhishthira, who was the personality of goodness, wanted everyone under his administration, especially human beings who have better developed consciousness, to become devotees of Lord Krishna so that everyone can become free from their trifles of material existence. His motto of administration was all good for the citizens. For a personified goodness, he knew perfectly well what is actually good for them. He conducted the administration on that principle and not on Rakshasi, demonic principle of sense gratification. And an ideal king, he had no personal ambition, and there was no place for sense gratification because all his senses at all times were engaged in the loving service of Supreme Lord, which includes the partial service of the living beings who form the parts and parcels of the complete world. Those who are busy rendering service to the parts and parcels, leaving aside the whole, only spoil time and energy. As one does when watering the leaves of a tree without watering the roots. If water is poured onto the roots, the leaves are enlived perfectly and automatically. But if water is poured on the leaves only, the whole energy is spoiled. Maharaja Yudhishthira therefore was constantly engaging in the service of Lord, and thus the parts and parcels of the world, the living beings under his careful administration, were perfectly attended with all comforts in this life and all progress in the next. That is the way of perfect management of state administration. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. 12.5 Translation purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Hare Krishna. Jagannath Prabhu.
Hare Krishna Prabhu. News even reached translation. News even reached the celestial planets about Maharaja Yudhishthira's worldly position, the sacrifices by which he would attain better direction, better destination. His queen, his stalwart brothers, his extensive land, his sovereignty over the planet Earth, and his fame, etc. The purport. Only a rich and great man's name and fame are known all over the world, and the name of the and the name and fame of Maharaja Yudhishthira reached the higher planets because of the good administration, worldly possessions, glorious wife Draupadi, the strength of his the brothers Bhishma and Arjuna, and his solid sovereign power over the world. known as Jambudvipa. Here the word loka is significant. There are different lokas or higher planets scattered all over the sky, both material and spiritual. A person can reach them by dint of his work in the present life. As stated Bhagavad Gita 9.25, no forceful entrance is allowed there. That any materials scientists and engineers who have discovered the vehicles to travel over the few thousand miles in outer space will not be allowed entrance. That is not the way to reach the better planets, and most to qualify himself to enter into the such happy planets by sacrifice and service. Those who are sinful in every step of life can expect only to be degraded into animal life, to suffer more and more the the pangs of material existence. And this is also stated in Bhagavad Gita 16.19. Maharaja Yudhishthira's good sacrifice and qualifications were so lawfully and victorious that even the residents of the higher celestial planets were already prepared to receive him as one of them. Hare Krishna.
1.6 Translation and purport by Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Hare Krishna, Abhishek Prabhu, Saraswati, you can share the purport.
Hare Krishna. Translation. O Brahmanas, the opulence of the king was so enchanting that the denizens of heaven aspired for it. But because he was absorbed in the service of the Lord, nothing could satisfy him except the Lord's service. Purport. There are two things in the world which can satisfy living beings. When one is materially engrossed, he is satisfied only by sense gratification. But when one is liberated from the conditions of the material modes, he is satisfied only by rendering loving service for the satisfaction of the Lord. This means that the living being is constitutionally a servitor and not one who is served. Being illusioned by the conditions of the external energy, one falsely thinks himself to be the served, but actually he's not served. He's servant of the senses like lust, desire, anger, avarice, pride, madness, and intolerance. When one is in his proper senses by attainment of spiritual knowledge, he realizes that he is not the master of the material world but is only a servant of the senses. At that time he begs for the service of the Lord and thus becomes happy without being illusioned by so-called material happiness. Maharaj Yudhishthir was one of the liberated souls, and therefore for him there was no pleasure in a vast kingdom, good wife, obedient brothers, happy subjects, and prosperous world. These blessings automatically follow for a pure devotee, even though the devotee does not aspire for them. The example set herein is exactly suitable. It is said that one who is hungry is never satisfied by anything other than food.
The whole material world is full of hungry living beings. The hunger is not for good food, shelter, or sense gratification. The hunger is for this spiritual atmosphere. Due to ignorance only, they think that the world is dissatisfied because there is not sufficient food, shelter, defense, and objects of sense gratification. This is called illusion. When the living being is hungry for spiritual satisfaction, he is misinterpreted by material hunger. But the foolish leaders cannot see that even the people who are most sumptuously materially satisfied are still hungry. And what is their hunger and poverty? This hunger is actually for spiritual food, shelter, spiritual defense, and spiritual sense gratification. These can be obtained in the association of the Supreme Spirit Lord Sri Krishna, and therefore one who has them cannot be attracted by the so-called food, shelter, defense, and sense gratification of the material world, even if they are relished by the denizens of the heavenly planets. Therefore, in the Bhagavad Gita 8.16, it is said by the Lord that even in the topmost planet of the universe, namely Brahmaloka, where the duration of the life is multiplied by millions of years by Earth's calculation, one cannot satisfy his hunger. Such hunger can be satisfied only when the living being is situated in immortality, which is attained in the spiritual sky, far, far above the Brahmaloka, in the association of Lord Mukunda, the Lord who awards his devotees the transcendental pleasure of liberation. Hare Krishna.
12.7 Translation and purport by Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Srila Prabhupada ki Jai. Hare Krishna. Sagar Prabhu. Sagar Prabhu. Okay. Swapna Mataji, you can continue.
Hare Krishna Prabhu. Translation. O son of Brigu, Saunaka, when the child Parikshith, the great fighter, was in the womb of his mother Uttara and was suffering from the burning heat of Brahmastra thrown by Ashwatthama, he could observe the Supreme Lord coming to him. Purport. Death generally involves remaining in trance for 7 months. A living being, according to his own action, is allowed to enter into the womb of a mother by the vehicle of father semen, and thus he develops his desired body. This is the law of birth in specific bodies according to one's past actions. When he is awake from trance, he feels the inconvenience of being confined within the womb, and thus he wants to come out of it, and sometimes fortunately prays to Lord for such liberation. Maharaja Parikshit, while in the womb of his mother, was struck by the Brahmastra released by Ashwatthama, and he was feeling the burning heat. But because he was a devotee of Lord, the Lord at once appeared himself within the womb by his all-powerful energy, and the child could see that someone else has come to save him. Even in that helpless condition, the child Parikshit endured the unbearable temperature due to his being a great fighter by nature. And for this reason, the word Vira has been used. Hare Krishna.
12.8 Translation. He, the Lord, was only thumb high, but he was all transcendental. He had a very beautiful blackish infallible body, and he wore a dress of lightning yellow and a helmet of blazing gold. Thus he was seen by the child. 12.9 Translation and purport by Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Srila Prabhupada ki Jai. Hare Krishna Pushkala.
The Lord was enriched with 4 hands, earrings of molten gold, and eyes blood red with fury, as he loitered about his club constantly encircled him like a shooting star. Purport. It is said in the Brahma Samhita, chapter 5, that the Supreme Lord Govinda, by his one planetary portion, enters into the halo of the universe and distributes himself as Paramatma or the Super Soul not only within the heart of every living being but also within every atom of the material elements. Thus the Lord is all pervading by his inconceivable potency, and thus he entered the womb of Uttara to save his beloved devotee Maharaja Parikshit. In the Bhagavad Gita 9.31, the Lord assured everyone that his devotees are never to be vanquished. No one can kill a devotee of the Lord because he is protected by the Lord, and no one can save a person whom the Lord decides to kill. The Lord is all powerful, and therefore he can both save and kill as he likes. He became visible to his devotee Maharaja Parikshit even in that awkward position in the womb of his mother, in a shape just suitable for his vision. The Lord can become bigger than thousands of universes and can become smaller than an atom in the same time. Merciful as he is, he becomes just calculation. He can become bigger than what we can think of, and he can become smaller than what we can conceive. But in all circumstances, he is the same all-powerful Lord. There is no difference between the term-like Vishnu in the womb of Uttara and the full-fledged Narayana in the Vaikuntha Dhama, the kingdom of Godhead. He accepts the form of Arka Vigraha, worshipful deity, just to accept service from his different incapable devotees. By the mercy of the Arka Vigraha, the form of the Lord in material elements, the devotees who are in the material world can easily approach the Lord, although he is not conceivable by the material senses. The Arka Vigraha is therefore an all spiritual form of the Lord to be pursued by the material devotees. Such an Arka Vigraha of the Lord is never to be considered material. There is no difference between matter and spirit for the Lord, although there is a gulf of difference between the two in the case of conditioned living being. For the Lord, there is nothing but spiritual existence, and similarly, there is nothing except spiritual existence for the pure devotee of the Lord in his intimate relation with the Lord.
12.10 Translation. The Hare Krishna Sagar who? Yes, translation.
The screen is not showing. The
Please,
screen is not showing.
the screen is not visible? Okay. The Lord was thus engaged in vanquish.
The Lord was thus engaged in radiation of the Brahmastra, just as the sun evaporates a drop of dew. He was observed by the child who thought about who he was.
2.12.11 Translation purport was Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Hare Krishna Sapan Prabhu.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji. Translation.
Not moving.
While thus observed by the child, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the Super Soul of everyone, and the Protector of the righteous, who stretches in all directions and who is unlimited by time and space, disappeared at once. Purport. Child Parikshit was not observing a living being who is limited by time and space. There is a gulf of difference between the Lord and the individual human being. The Lord is mentioned herein as the supreme living being, unlimited by time and space. Every living being is limited by time and space. Even though a living being is qualitatively one with the Lord, quantitatively there is a great difference between the super soul and the common individual soul. In the Bhagavad Gita, both the living beings and the supreme being are said to be all-pervading. Yena sarvam idam tatam. Yet there is a difference between these two kinds of all-pervasiveness. A common living being or soul can be all-pervading within his own limited body, but the supreme living being is all-pervading in all space and all time. A common living being cannot extend its influence over another common living being by its
Hare Krishna.
Yeah, I missed the line, Prabhuji.
A common living being can.
By its all-pervasiveness, but the supreme super soul, the personality of Godhead, is unlimitedly able to exert its influence over all places and all times and over all living beings. And because he is all-pervasive, unlimited by time and space, he can appear even within the womb of a mother of child Parikshith. He is mentioned herein as the protector of the righteous. Anyone who is a surrendered soul unto the Supreme is righteous, and he is specifically protected by the Lord in all circumstances. The Lord is the indirect protector of the unrighteous also, for he rectifies their sins through his external potency. The Lord is mentioned herein as one who is dressed in the 10 directions. This means dressed with garments on 10 sides up and down. He is present everywhere and can appear and disappear at his will from everywhere and anywhere. His appearance from the sight of the child Parikshit does not mean that he appeared on the spot from any other place. He was present there, and even after his disappearance, he was there, although invisible to the eyes of the child. The material covering of the effulgent firmament is also something like a womb of the mother nature. We are all put into the womb by the Lord, the Father of all living beings. He is present everywhere, even in this material womb of Mother Durga, and those who are deserving can see the Lord. Hare Krishna.
12.12 Translation purport by Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Hare Krishna Nitya Mataji.
Hare Krishna. Translation. Thereupon, when all the good signs of the zodiac gradually evolved, the heir apparent of Pandu, who would be exactly like him in proneness to birth, purport. Astronomical calculations of stellar influences upon a living being are not suppositions, but are factual as confirmed in Srimad Bhagavatam. Every living being is controlled by the laws of nature at every minute, just as a citizen is controlled by the influence of the state. The state laws are grossly observed, but the laws of material nature, being subtle to a gross understanding, cannot be experienced grossly. As stated in the Bhagavad Gita 3.9, every action of life produces another reaction, which is binding upon us, and only those who are acting on behalf of Yagna, Vishnu, are not bound by reactions. Our actions are judged by the higher authorities, the agents of the Lord, and thus we are awarded bodies according to our activities. The law of nature is so subtle that every part of our body is influenced by the respective stars, and a living being obtains his working body to fulfill his terms of imprisonment by the manipulation of such astronomical influence. A man's destiny is therefore ascertained by the birth time, constellation of stars, and a factual horoscope is made by a learned astrologer. It is a great science, and misuse of a science does not make it useless. Maharaja Parikshit, or even the personality of Godhead, appear in certain constellations of good stars, and thus the influence is exerted upon the body, thus born at an auspicious moment. The most auspicious constellation of stars takes place during the appearance of the Lord in this material world, and it is specifically called Jayanti, a word not to be abused for any other purposes. Maharaja Parikshit was not only a great Kshatriya emperor, but also a great devotee of the Lord. Thus, he cannot take his birth at any inauspicious moment. As a proper place and time is selected to receive a respectable personage, so also to receive such a personality as Maharaja Parikshit, who was especially cared for by the Supreme Lord, a suitable moment is chosen when all good stars assemble together to exert their influence upon the king. Thus, he took his birth just to be known as the great hero of Srimad Bhagavatam. This suitable arrangement of astral influences is never a creation of man's will, but is the arrangement of the superior management of the agency of the Supreme Lord. Of course, the arrangement is made according to the good or bad deeds of the living beings. Herein lies the importance of pious acts performed by the living being. Only by pious acts can one be allowed to get good wealth, good education, and beautiful features. The samskaras of the school of Sanatan Dharma, man's eternal engagement, are highly suitable for creating an atmosphere for taking advantage of good stellar influences, and therefore Garbhadhana Samskara, or the first seedling purificatory process prescribed for the higher caste, is the beginning of all pious acts to receive a good, pious, and intelligent class of men in human society. There will be peace and prosperity in the world due to good and sane population only. There is hell and disturbance only because of the unwanted insane populace addicted to sex indulgence. Hare Krishna.
Translation purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhakti Vedanta, Srila Prabhupada ki Jai. Hare Krishna, Sri Ganesh Prabhu. Read the first two paragraphs.
Hare Krishna. Translation. King Yudhishthira, who was very satisfied with the birth of Maharaja Parikshit, had the purificatory process of the birth performed. Learned Brahmanas headed by Dhaumya and Kripa recited auspicious hymns. Purport. There is need for a good and intelligent class of Brahmanas who are expert in performing the purificatory processes prescribed in the system of Varnasrama Dharma. Unless such purificatory processes are performed, There is no possibility of good population. And in the age of Kali, the population all of the world is of Sudra quality or lower for the wanted of this purifactory process. This is not possible, however, to revive the Vedic process of purifactory in this age for want of proper facilities and group brahmanas, but there is the Pancharatrika system also recommended for this age. The Pancharatrika system acts on the Sudra class of men, supposedly the population of the Kali Yuga, and it is the prescribed purifactory process suitable to the age and time. Such a purifactory process is allowed only for spiritual upliftment and not for any other purposes. Spiritual upliftment is never conditioned by higher or lower percentage. After the Garbhadhana purificatory process, there are certain other samskaras like Simantonayana, Sadha Bhakshanam, etc. during the period of pregnancy. And when the child is born, the first purificatory process is Jata Karma. This was performed duly by Maharaja Yudhishthira with the help of good and learned Brahmanas like Dhaumya, the royal priest, and Kripacharya, who was not only a priest but also a great general. Both these learned and perfect priests, assisted by other good Brahmanas, were employed by Maharaja Yudhishthira to perform the ceremony. Therefore, all the samskaras, purificatory process, are not mere formalities or social functions only, but they all are for practical purposes and can be successfully performed by expert Brahmanas like Dhauma and Kripa. Such Brahmanas are not only rare but also not available in this age, and therefore for the purpose of spiritual upliftment in this fallen age, the Goswamis prefer the purificatory process under Pancharatrika formulas to the Vedic rites.
Hare Krishna, Swapna Mataji.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Yeah. Shall I? Yeah. Kripacharya is son of the great Rishi Sardban and was born in the family of Gautama. The birth is said to be accidental. By chance, the great Rishi Sardban met Janapadi, a famous society girl of heaven, and the Rishi Sardban discharged semen in two parts. By one part immediately a male child and another part a female child were born as twins. The male child was later known as Kripa and the female child was known as Kripi. Maharaja Shantanu, while engaged in chase in the jungle, picked up the children and brought them to the Brahmanical status by the proper purificatory process. Kripacharya later became a great general like Dronacharya, and his sister was married to Dronacharya. Kripacharya later on took part in the battle of Kurukshetra and joined the party of Duryodhana. Kripacharya helped kill Abhimanyu, the father of Maharaja Parikshith, but he was still held in esteem by the family of Pandavas due to his being as great a Brahmana as Dronacharya. When the Pandavas were sent to the forest after being defeated in the gambling game with Duryodhana, Dhritarashtra entrusted the Pandavas to Kripacharya for guidance. After the end of the battle, Kripacharya again became a member of the royal assembly, and he was called during the birth of Maharaja Parikshit for recitation of all auspicious Vedic hymns to make the ceremony successful. Maharaja Yudhishthira, while quitting the palace of his great departure to the Himalayas, entrusted Kripacharya with Maharaja Parikshit as his disciple, and he left home satisfied because of the Kripacharya's taking charge of Maharaja Parikshit. The great administrators, kings, and emperors were also under the guidance of learned Brahmanas like Kripacharya, and thus were able to act properly in the discharge of political responsibilities. Hare Krishna.
12.14 Translation purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Srila Prabhupada ki Jai. Hare Krishna, Abhishek Prabhu and Saraswati Maji get share. Hare Krishna, Saraswati Maji.
Hare Krishna. Translation. Upon the birth of a son, the king who knew how, where, and when charity should be given, gave gold, land, villages, elephants, horses, and good food grains to the Brahmanas. Purport. Only the Brahmanas and sannyasis are authorized to accept charity from the householders. In all the different occasions of samskaras, especially during the time of birth, marriage, and death, wealth is distributed to the Brahmanas because the Brahmanas give the highest quality of service in regard to the prime necessity of humankind. The charity was substantial in the shape of gold, land, villages, horses, elephants, and food grains with other materials for cooking complete foodstuff. The Brahmanas were not, therefore, poor in the actual sense of the term. On the contrary, because they possessed gold, land, villages, horses, elephants, and sufficient grains, they had nothing to earn for themselves. They would simply devote themselves to the well being of the entire society. The word Tirthavit is significant because the king knew well where and when charity has to be given. Charity is never unproductive or blind. In the Shastras, charity was offered to persons who deserve to accept charity by dint of spiritual enlightenment. The so called Daridra Narayana, a misconception of the Supreme Lord by unauthorized persons, is never to be found in the Shastras as the object of charity, nor can a wretched poor man receive much munificent charity in the way of horses, elephants, land, and villages. The conclusion is that the intelligent men or the Brahmanas, specifically engaged in the service of the Lord, were properly maintained without anxiety for the needs of the body, and the king and other householders gladly looked after their comforts. It is enjoined in the Shastras that as long as a child is joined with the mother by the navel pipe, the child is considered to be of one body with the mother. But as soon as the pipe is cut and the child is separated from the mother, the purificatory process of Jata Karma is performed. The administrative demigods and past forefathers of the family come to see a newly born child, and such an occasion is specifically accepted as the proper time for distributing wealth to the right persons productively for the spiritual advancement of the society.
Very. So we'll stop it. We'll stop here. We'll continue in the next Thursday. Sorry, Tuesday. Thank you very much for joining today's session. वाञ्छा कल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्येव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो अनंत कोटि वैष्णववृंद की जय श्री प्रभुपाद की जय ग्रंथराज श्रीमद्भागवतम की जय हरे कृष्ण. We'll meet again next Tuesday.